but it's recorded.
Just a note to the readers, I'm going to mute everyone now. So before you read, unmute yourself, then mute yourself again. And also, some people are attending on Zoom and some people are attending via the streaming on Facebook. I want to welcome everybody. There are more people in attendance than you see right now in the gallery. So I'm going to mute everybody. You can unmute yourself before you read. Okay, well, I would like to welcome everyone to Blue Light at the gallery. This is today we're hosting the West Coast book launch of NYC from the Inside. This reading is co-hosted on Zoom by Poetry Bay Productions with appreciation to Don Krieger for streaming. It's so nice to have a tech expert here. This reading is very much in the spirit of Walt Whitman, a gathering of voices from all over the city. NYC from the Inside was edited by George Wallace, writer in residence at the Walt Whitman birthplace. I like to describe George as Walt Whitman meets Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who is also in this book. The Penny Candy Store Beyond the L is one of the first poems I fell in love with and memorized when I was 19 years old. And then woven together, the voices in this book create a Whitman-esque transcendent vision. NYC from the Inside has been getting worldwide attention. Before introducing the poets, and we have 12 poets reading today, I'd like to read from the introduction by Neeli Cherkovski from Kosovo. The poems of this book are proof that poets dream, and their dreams lead us to truth and humanism, to the beautiful and the sublime. At the same time, they tell us in a beautiful language of all the disasters of man, the ugliness of life, and the awful possibilities of dehumanization. People in history have always dreamed and will always need to dream. And when it comes to dreams, desires, disappointments, and the enunciation of human spiritual needs, poetry has always been the best way to give those necessary human moments expression. Life is a desert and an oasis. It is an Eden full of life and liveliness, but it can also be a burned Eden. Life is a dream that lives and one that fades, an innate desire and a gilded one, a day drowning in darkness. And we know that these hidden truths take their best and truest ways to the light through poetry. Because art, said the great writer Henry Miller, teaches nothing but the meaning of life. So it is with this anthology, which truly teaches us Miller's simple truth. Especially in turbulent times when art serves as an ideal opportunity to see beyond the darkness, especially to the reader of a huge city or in one who needs to hear the voices of its poets. Yes, this book is fantastic evidence that poetry is one of the best ways to understand ourselves, the universe around us, and our own feelings, dreams, and desires. Poetic dreams expand the boundaries of freedom and imagination, and also educate us not to submit to totalitarian mindsets, formalities, and vanities. These are the voices of poets living in our time. Their voice becomes the voice of our time and speaks to and for every reader in New York and in Rome, in Stockholm and in Pristina, in Buenos Aires and Tirana, and Tokyo and Berlin. And again, that was from Neeli Cherkovski from Kosovo. And now I'm going to introduce George Wallace to introduce the poets.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane Frank. mean, thank you from the get-go, because this whole anthology really originated with Diane. It was her conception, which she brought to me after the very successful Fog and Light anthologies of San Francisco poets. And she turned it over to me and said, run with it. And has always been very helpful and gracious and open about the size of it, the scope of it, and their ability to include a cross-section of voices from different generations of poets and different genres and different constituencies within New York City and across the United States. And this particular reading, I think, is of real importance for the celebration of this book, in that New York City from the inside is a bi-coastal San Francisco, New York City phenomenon. So the fact that we are bringing in people from San Francisco today into this reading is particularly significant. Not altogether unexpected. I think you all know that that the connection between New York and San Francisco and poetry and other arts, for that matter, has been strong for a couple of generations. So this is an extension of that. That's a connection that goes back to Jack London and his relationship to New York City poets who came out and part of the Bohemian movement, wandering through the groves of Northern California, and of course through the 50s and 60s right up to the present. So the fact that several of the poets here, senior poets in the San Francisco greater San Francisco Bay poetry community, either are from New York or have significant roots here, I think is an indication of that. There's a couple of the poets that we aren't able to include today, of course, because they've gone before us: Jack Hirschman, Diane DePrima, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. All of them write about their early childhood or early adult experiences in New York, and we have a poem from each of those people in the book. We are fortunate to have here today a number of other people. I will say that Diane, just to follow up on what Diane said, yes, The Penny Candy Store Beyond the L, which was a poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and which is in the book, does connect many of us here to this book, and actually connects Diane and I together, because in 1970, when we both took a class with W.D. Snodgrass, Oral Interpretation of Modern Poetry at Syracuse University, that's one of the three poems that I read during the course of that class, which Snodgrass was not happy about it, but I read it anyway. And so that's another thing that connects us. All right, I am going to now, in no particular order, introduce the readers who have signed up for today from the collection, who are with us here today, with a very minimal introduction. And only to say, those of you who are in the book and you have read with us before and will be reading or will be reading from with us in the future at other events. We have 25 events during the course of the summer into the fall, at Zoom and live. And those of you who are visiting us as poets or just as friends of members of the reading group here today, thank you all for joining us. Our first reader from New York, she's from the Upper East Side and is going to go first because I won't even say why, but she's fighting a good fight for us all. As a person who's been instrumental in recent months in mounting many of the live poetry events for this show, for this book, and putting them on YouTube. And that is our own Blue Light Press author, Francine Witte.
Thank you so much, George. Can you all hear me? Okay, I'll do the best I can. This is the one from the book. So I want to make sure I can read that one. This is called The Moon Takes the E Train. Stumbles drunk from a downtown dive, swirling himself milk into coffee down the stairs and onto the train, and then forgets his way home, gets off instead at 40 deuce, looks around and remembers the old style scene, hookers and porn flicks, how often in his fullness he would push some poor sucker into Mr. Nasty's peep show, watch him skulk out later, face wiped off, slither home to Bridge and Tunnel, lighter $20, but then the whole place went carnival, wax museums and kiddie theater, life-size Elmo and Elsa, who will pose with you for a hefty tip. And he's looking around at all the lights blinking into the darkened dark. And that's when a couple approaches the moon and asks to take a selfie. How much it would mean, what with the moon being the thing that made them fall in love. And the moon has heard this all before, how he's pulled the tides and planted romance. But really, he has a long, long night ahead, trying to remember which subway will take him back to the sky. But instead, the moon takes a breath, looks at his reflection in the couple's eyes, nestles in between them and smiles. Okay, I'll read another, thank you. I think it's kind of obvious what's going on here. Okay. Seeing Paul on Madison Avenue. McCartney, not the apostle, and me walking past Vera Wang or Michael Kors, that small blip of Manhattan up past the hum of trucks and bicycles slice, that part that seems more grown up, subdued, just like adulthood buffered me. But there was Paul, bigger than my I Love Paul button, bigger than the Ed Sullivan Show, and teenaged me was whispering, it's him, and it was. And the whole universe shrinking down to a shiver. I might have said hello, I don't recall, because everything was cotton stopped. The taxi cabs were yellow submarines, the crosswalks Abbey Road. I floated home that afternoon, thinking how impossible that would have been, Paul walking anywhere unmobbed, the city around me suddenly hushed. And I'll read one more. This is called Other Summers. We were wolves then, doing the wander ponder, our hunter hearts pulling us through the forest night. We needed to eat adventure, and so we would nose push anything lying still. We would roll it over and roll it over, and when it did move, even a little, we would tear into its skin, our teeth and tongues, a hurricane of need, the only light coming from the moon and a sash of milk stars, the only sound, the whisper of a wind in our throats, slowing back down to a breath. And I want to thank George for editing all this, and Diane, of course, and thank all of you for bearing with me.
Thank you very much. Beautiful. Love that Paul McCartney poem. Thank you, Francine. Francine Witte. Next up, and I'll just parenthetically tell Don that Tongo is pending approval to get in. If you could pick up on that, I'd appreciate it. He's trying to get in. Our second reader is...
Tongo is in, George. I let him in. Tongo's in.
Oh, great. Thank you, Diane.
Okay.
Welcome, Tongo. I don't see you, but apparently you're here, so that's good. Looks like we have a full complement. Charles Rammelkamp, I'm going to introduce next. Charles is a noted reviewer of poetry books, many poetry books, but is known as prose editor for Brickhouse Books in Baltimore, has a poetry chapbook, Immortal Call. It was published just in past January. As a good friend to the anthology. Please welcome Charles Rammelkamp.
Thank you very much, George. And thank you to you and to Diane for including me in this anthology. I sort of feel a little bit like a fraud because I've never actually lived in New York. I've been there many times. My daughter spent a summer there. I have relatives, in-laws who live there. And the poem I'm going to read is about a visit that I took there in 2001. There used to be a guy named Tom Catterson. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him. Tom Catterson is nicknamed Pepper.
Orange Bear.
Yeah. He and his partner, Rob, God, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but they had a magazine called Medicinal Purposes, and they staged readings, and they had a little television program, I'm not sure how widely distributed, called Poet to Poet. And they came down to Baltimore one year. This is like 1999, and we recorded a bunch of poets from Baltimore, and it was a lot of fun. Anyway, Ode to the Orange Bear. I'd arranged the poetry reading for October, but the Orange Bear, where the reading took place, was on Murray Street in the financial district, only blocks from where the World Trade Center towers had collapsed in fire and rubble only a month before. We moved the reading up to mid-January. I took the Metro liner up from Maryland, my friend Roger meeting me at Penn Station. We stopped at his office on 53rd Street, skyscraper windows looking south downtown. I had to look away, Roger confessed. I couldn't watch. Of course, we'd all see it over and over again on television for months to come. We rode the subway downtown, emerging like moles into daylight and snow, a smell of ash and smoke like an invisible shroud. 4 months later, the snow reinforcing the tomb-like solemnity. Tourists milled around the fenced-off crater where the buildings once stood. In the Orange Bear, we met Pepper, our host, who sponsored us to a scotch. Cigarette smoke hazed the room. City ordinances be damned. And over the mahogany bar, a cheap painting of a reclining odalisque hung like the cover of a pulp fiction novel, a broken down pool table in the center of the room, likewise reinforcing the mood. The first poet, a humanitarian activist, read poems about tortured children, raped women, Central American military thugs, so fitting to the World Trade Center atmosphere that day. Then it was my turn. Already looking forward to my train home, I stood behind the microphone by the wobbly billiards table. I hope I didn't give the wrong impression. I loved it. I loved the whole experience. I hadn't planned to read any other poems, if that's...
That's fine. It's up to you. You have a little bit more time if you have something else you'd like to read. If not,
yeah, I think I'll just
Charles Rammelkamp, thank you for your modesty and very fine poem. A lot of people remember the Orange Bear. Yeah, a lot of us here.
Does it still exist?
No, well, no. I mean, you know, it was down there in the rubble. You couldn't get down to it. So, yeah, I don't know. Could be that somebody started something else up there, but it's not poetry now.
Yeah.
And of course, Thomas Caddison is lost to us as well. So
yeah, and Robert Dunn.
Thank you very much.
Dunn, that was the other.
Yeah. Next up, I would like to introduce a West Coast guy, although he's spent a lot of time here in New York recently, especially because of his work with his father's Frank Silvera writer's workshop. But he's back and forth from the West Coast, the Bay Area. I guess Monterey is called the Bay Area, you know, and here in New York. He's got a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge behind him and runs the Rubber Chicken Poetry Competition in Monterey at the East Winds coffee shop. And he's one of the several people here I've had the privilege of introducing at the Walt Whitman birthplace over the years. Please welcome Garland Thompson Jr.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. It is a great pleasure and a great honor to be here today and also to be in this anthology. And I just want to compliment everybody, all the readers, and Diane and George and Francine. I was blown away when I got my copy, and I've been reading everybody else's work and just really enjoying the hell out of it. So thank you so much, everybody. I'd like to do just a couple of quick things for you. One piece that is in the book and one that's not. This is, since this is about New York City, when I was 18 years old, I had a job for about a year at the Blue Note. I was jazz club on 3rd Street and 6th Avenue, and I was the very first, had the honor, the dubious honor of being the very first house sound and lighting engineer, person hired strictly to work with the bands. So this is a little story about my time there. It's called Blue Notes. Betty Carter bawled me out for messing with her sound my first day on the job. Carmen McRae stroked my hair lovingly on the stairs just before she went on as her band warmed up the crowd. Stanley Turrentine came in late, his gold Mercedes-Benz pulling into the garage across from the club, the Blue Note, on 3rd Street, just off 6th Avenue. He came in late, blew a hot set, hit the office upstairs, and the blow, came back, blew a cold set compared to the first, and I felt compelled to ask his security guard to please tell Stanley to wipe his nose. I mean, there he was at the desk, his nostrils flared open and covered in white powder. John Lewis and the Modern Jazz Quartet, MJQ by those in the know, were classy and cool. Mellowed by all the years and experience, they swung the house with a quiet power, full and bright like a beautiful spring day in Dubrovnik. Gato Barbieri blew his sax like only he could, then refused to play the next set until we got the monitor speaker working again. I found a workaround. There's always a workaround. He came back down and blew another hella set. Riot Act reading number 2. Garland gets dressed down by the great Oscar Peterson himself, who only played the expensive, very expensive Bosendorfer piano, who could take a change fast as lightning and often did, as I found out, much to my peril, night 1 of his week-long engagement at the Blue Note Jazz Club, when I left the soundboard to quietly venture into the audience to hear what they were hearing. I was still learning the room acoustically, and halfway back to my sound mixer, 8 bars into a ballad he had just sprung on us in one of his lightning swaps, he stopped the band cold. For a heartbeat, there was no sound, save the echo of the sound that just was. Then I hear it, those fateful words booming out of Oscar Peterson's mouth. "Hey, can you turn it down? This is a Bosendorfer, you know?" The room was packed. I wanted to die, and my only saving grace was we were all in a dark room. But it hurt like hell just the same. Later that night, his bass player, the great Niels Hennings Orsted Pedersen, saw me at the bar nursing my wounds. He told me, "Oscar's hands are hurting, his arthritis is kicking in, and that I shouldn't take it personal. Niels is one hell of a bass player. He made me feel better that night. I'll never forget him for it." True stories. And to finish off my time with this wonderful group here, thank you everyone. Glad y'all enjoyed that. The Blue Note is still there, by the way. You can still go catch shows there. This is a piece from the book, and this is called Blow Bad Blues, Brother Latif. And this was just a little context or story. This came about after hearing I think it was a 12-bar blues by Yusef Lateef, fantastic sax player, who up until just about 6, 7, 8 months before he passed was playing 200 dates a year around the world with his band. So an amazing man to be inspired by. But this is called Blow Bad Blues, Brother Latif. Blow bad blues, Brother Latif, blow mean bad blues with jump and swing and everything. Till the 2, till the 4, till the 6 a.m. sleepy time when the sunrise sits just over Earth's eyes, so languid on the horizon. Blow bad blues, Brother Latif, blow mean bad blues the world has never heard before. Cover the sky with your horny sax sounds, swinging with the backbeat boogie-woogie of barroom brawls, Big Joe Turner and the working man drinking heavy to ease the pain of being stepped on. blow of brothel houses, abusive spouses, bloody crosses burning in the heat of the goddamn night. Ha! Blow of blowing out a tire on the Cadillac, damn it, not again. Flat City halfway to the gig, on the run and caught somewhere between nowhere and nowhere at all. Blow bad blues, Brother Lateef. Blow mean bad blues of your hand sliding up her warm thigh, making love to her like you make love to your sax. Oh, baby, sweet Sula Mama snaking hot tongue down to your medulla oblongata. Baby, I gotta go, blow bad blues with Brother Lateef. Blow mean bad blues. Sing lullabies to the memories of hot Havana nights, drinking wild Cubano rum, watching Fidel and Che taking back the banks and kicking out the mob. Ha! No mas traficante for the Santos boys, huh? And sweet Sula Mama, shaking her hips not 2 feet from the band, while Viva la Revolution raged just outside the door, her cheeks and muscles bulging with the sweat and the sound of gunfire. Her sweet Sula Mama curves, the fabric covered, stretched to impossible tightness. The shape is where it starts, man. That's what Brother Lateef says when he whispers, when he blows bad blues, and when he blows mean bad blues, and he whispers, it's all in the telling. The sound that paints a picture is worth 1,000 notes in the air and 10,000 notes on this here saxophone. He whispers this in my ear, then blows a G flat, stopping to smile big at me who is listening to him blow mean bad blues. Blow, Brother Lateef, blow those blues in my ear and out the door to the streets where we, the people, need them, where the sidewalks crack under the weight of the heavy-hearted whose hope is gone with the slash of a knife. Send them out with a voice pure enough to stop the fists that pound a woman's bare white flesh on crowded 6th Street and Avenue A and Lower East Side, New York City, as witnesses of all my colors stand by cheering for more. Vaya! Kill that honky! Lay those blues down hard to mend the broken of spirit, the lost and the forlorn, the tattered and the war-torn. And when you have comforted all of them, turn your blues to the one who looks into the mirror and calls himself me. Blow bad blues, Brother Lateef. Blow mean bad blues. And I'll meet you out past the chicken shack, a bottle of wine in my hand, my soul intact. We'll meet, we'll laugh, and we'll blow bad blues, Brother Lateef. Blow mean, bad blues. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, Garland Thompson Jr. Thank you, Garland. Always a pleasure. Well, we will now turn to a poet who actually represents two of the boroughs of New York City in her own way, having been raised in Queens and writing about the experience of being raised in Queens and referring to Manhattan as the city, even though Queens is one of the boroughs. And she's up in the Bronx now. I don't know if you know Lorraine Corelli, who's with us today, but she's Bronx Book Fair. She's here. So Claudiine is the winner of the 2020 Blue Light Press Poetry Book Award and has read with us once before, I think. And I'm glad to have her back with us reading with this collection today. So take it away, Claudiine Nash.
Okay. Thank you so much, George and Diane. Again, it's such a wonderful honor to be included here, and so lovely to see you. Yeah, you know, I grew up in Queens, haven't lived there for many years, but you know, looking back, I'm very proud of my home borough for its incredible diversity. It's 2.3 million people speaking 138 different languages. Yeah, we always grew up calling Manhattan the city. So I will read for you. We used to call Manhattan the city, as if Queens didn't count. This train is a slow-moving whisper that curves at an impossible angle. This whisper is spoken in 138 different mother tongues at once. This train may stall, but is a hardworking routine tinged with promise. This promise teeters over roads and schoolyards and is a city unto itself. Somewhere below, someone is crossing a threshold. Someone stands in a small room and packs a sack of empanadas or samosas or a foil-wrapped lunch. This train speeds past the mosque and the Korean church that was once a Jewish temple. Its cars rattle above the night market and the South Asian sweet shop. A child rises in a small room, then boards this train carrying an enormous thought that curves at an equally impossible angle. It teeters around the bend, but does not fall. She eavesdrops on 2.3 million moments tinged with challenge or promise. Each moment curves at an impossible angle before entering the world at large. Some of these moments are spoken in any one of 138 different home languages. They are a city unto themselves. This train's passengers eavesdrop on each other's routines or hope-tinged moments. They steal seconds of eye contact and regard each other in silence. Okay, and then thank you. And then switching boroughs. I'm going to read one inspired by a different train. This is the 4 train. This one's called Sitting Zazen on the Downtown 4 train. Wherever you are in your small corner, there's a train rolling through you, carrying all the beings who've ever loved the dull colors of something or someone to life. And though the walls of your room may be worn and thick with neglect, if you stretch this moment so thin that the enemy in your head can't whisper, you may feel the cars of this train speed through all the empty stations you have ever known. So much so that when you glance at the strangers who pass through this dim and icy morning, the deepest tints and hues within you start to vibrate. You detect the secret sound the world makes when it speaks all its languages at once. Thank you.
That's great. So true. Claudiine Nash. Thank you very much, Claudiine Nash. I'd now like to turn to a guy, I think I first met him in September 10th, 2001. In San Francisco, we had a great conversation the night before 9/11. He was one of the readers for us in the 4-city Big Sur Marathon reading. His credentials in terms of jazz and poetry in New York City, Garland, his uncle, Harry Cherry, I believe his name was one of the founders of the 5 Spot. So he goes back that far in family heritage with New York City, and right up to the present as a writer for the Brooklyn Rail. Please welcome next Neeli Cherkovski. Have we got you, Neeli?
Am I on? Can you
Yes,
hear
you
me?
Yes, you are.
Oh, good. So that uncle was Herman Cherry. He was an abstract expressionist. He lived on Cooper Square, right next to where the five-star spot would be started. So I came to New York. I followed a woman from Israel to New York in 1970, and I stayed in this mansion in Old Westbury, Long Island, for about a week in the former maid's room. And then I went to the Hotel Albert, which had to have been the bottom feeding place of New York City at that time. I don't think it exists anymore, but it was the classic place. And I managed to last a couple months, and then I came back home. But I met Jerome Rothenberg, Muriel Rukeyser, Ted Jones, so many people. And it wasn't until San Francisco that I met Allen Ginsberg and Gregory Corso and Diane DePrima and people like that. And I had picked up the great Jack Hirschman in LA, a Bronx-born guy. So I sort of knew the New York lingo. So I'll read a couple poems. A poem from the anthology Manhattan, which I happened to have when the call came out. Hot dogs with mustard and sauerkraut. Hysterical women wringing out black luck, lost on the subway, drowning in rats. Who else made a random human hero born long ago with obsidian arrow, victimized by elevators, go straight to hell? Come down the ramp. Your father is old. His days will diminish. Manhattan rattles. Rabbi Rabinowitz blooms in Brooklyn. Public screaming, fear, taking advances. It's fair. Snow falls on bumpy sidewalks. We do pre-islands in plague. Oh Lord, I have rent control for my faint soul. Upstairs rooms. It was words made me who I am, the foot soldier of taxi cabs. If you come inside, listen to the avenues, pay attention to concrete trees, answer every kiss, become a question mark. New York, New York, Bronx is tone deaf, lovely, late, lonesome, glass shoulder, every exquisite pain of tumbling steel. So that's my New York poem. And because I think of New York, I think of Pfaff's. And I mean, I'm nostalgic for when I wasn't even born. I think of Whitman and all these early Bohemians, this underground place called Pfaff's, started by a Swiss guy who came to Manhattan. And it was an underground place, and Whitman would sit there with a beer and sip it all day. But there were all kinds of people, and it lasted for several years. And it actually helped get Leaves of Grass going. So I give it to Pfaff's for that. So here's two poems. These are my morning poems. Every day I sit down and I write simply by voice recognition. I don't type, and it's been good for me. Here I am, a man of the Hebrew alphabet, born to be confused. My sentences born in river mud, when the beautiful lady hands me an agate shaped like a rose. She knows I love such things because they are simple. She knows I never understood sentences or magic tricks. She smiles and pets the armored lion who has innocent teeth and will harm no one. I love these Hebrew letters because they leap and lead me far back to where the trees offer shade in the heat of the merciless desert. The first letter is a stag, and the second one has wild arms. Somewhere along the line, a camel rises and walks forever. I sit by her side. She presses my palm to her. Here is man. How is man? Is he allowed? Are we works of art? So that's that. I took care of my heritage in that poem. This is not me. There is not me inside. The hallways are filled with commentators, enemies of the state, defenders of the law, people who break promises, those who perform at the dinner table stranded, the bullshit artists, men with honor. They are crowded, diffused, made to remove, let alone move. Leave when the glittering night calls them to account. So alone I am, never alone. I fear Odysseus is on his way home after so many mythic centuries, lost in myrtle, color of grape leaves, looking out of a window in his heart. Let the breakers break, broad, reliable, on the beach at Pacific Grove, far past men's reach. The old captain lights the sea god who lives inside of him. It has been this way since his birth. That liquid god never sleeps. He bears no allegiance to the law. He walks on water and challenges the deep. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeli Cherkovski. Fabulous range. One of the things about this book is made it so much of a pleasure to collect this book together was the range of voices, and each one of you here represents a different facet, and that's one of the magic things about a mega city like New York City is its myriad voices. As Claudiine says, 138 different languages and 1,000 different personalities on every block. We do have Brooklyn in the house. Stuart Radowitz, who was a Blue Light author, but reminisces about his time walking on King's Highway and checking out the women in the clothing stores, and his poem, Remembrance of Brooklyn, is in the collection. Please welcome Stuart Radowitz. Microphone. Nope, no mic. You don't have no mic just yet.
Please unmute yourself.
Now, better? You can hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, so thank you. I just want to say it's an honor to be here with everybody, and it's been wonderful listening to you. The work has been so terrific. It's been really great. So I thank you all. I want to thank George for including me in the anthology. He may know or he may not know, I was at Syracuse also with Diane. I don't know if I knew you back in those days, but I knew Diane. I don't know what I think you and I were competition. I'm not sure. That's what I think. But thank you for including me. It's a pleasure. I love your work. And Diane, thank you for being a supporter and publishing my book. And it's just great to be here with everybody. So this first poem is called Brooklyn. And that's where I grew up. It was written in 1971 or 72. And when I wrote it, it was looking back on old Brooklyn. So now 71 and 72 is kind of old Brooklyn. But back then, it was looking further back. Brooklyn. This poem for Brooklyn is about you. It is never about I. It is never they or them or it or us. It is you and always has been. Down these concrete steps, narrow streets, alleys, wide avenues, parkways, parks seem to go back 100 years. Before there was cobblestone, dirt lanes crossed everywhere. God, the eagle has landed, and landed in Brooklyn. This thing you call Brooklyn, moonscape, landscape, buildingscape, fire and fire escape, Brooklyn eagle, Walt Whitman, wonder of science. There is no art to it, to this landing, to this falling down stoops and broken pavement, steps and broken concrete. How can you say this is Brooklyn when it's not? How can you say endless when it's that? Oak and elm and flowering cherry, glacial ravine, rock outcropping, overpass and underpass, squirrel and pizza, squirrel eating pizza. I swear no one would believe it. And you, Blackbird, trying so hard to get into my poem. Thank you. And the thing that was interesting about the squirrel, he was actually holding the slice like New York style by the crust, and two hands and munching away. So that was called Brooklyn. I'm going to read two more poems, not too long. Both of these are from my Blue Light book, which is called Snow Hangs on the Branches of Evergreens. That's going to be the last poem I read. So the second poem is called Disconnect. And I've been feeling a lot of disconnect now for a long time. About 6 or 9 months before the whole pandemic started, I had a sense that something bad was happening. And I wrote this down in my notes in a couple of places. I had no idea what it was going to be, but I used the word catastrophe. And a personally sense of disconnect, and that's the title of this poem. As the north wind blows over the tops of trees and across the field, time passes, relationships change, phones disconnect. One morning you get to work early and find you no longer have a job. One evening you come home to find intruders have eaten your ripe tomatoes, the ones you grew yourself in the garden behind your house. Someone else left a notice in your mailbox, a poem perhaps about Spain or Italy, a poem they wrote, or maybe Garcia Lorca. Maybe it was Black Trouble from the Gypsy Ballads, which ends the far off dawn. In the event it is something more serious, unspeakable tragedy, trampled down flowers, a child whose heart is not well, blueberries spilled across the kitchen floor, melted chocolate, death by disease. Nothing compares to the arc of light over glacial lakes, clear light, as if the veins flowing to your heart opened, as if I actually knew where I was going and went there. So thank you. That was Disconnect. And thank you. Somebody liked it. I'm glad to hear that. This last one is the title poem of the book. It's called, someone's before said Snow is Falling. This is called Snow Hangs on the Branches of Evergreens. It's one of my favorite poems. I love this poem because there's a lot of love in the poem. Snow hangs on the branches of evergreens. I fell in love with you over and over again until finally it was time for breakfast. Since I mostly eat oatmeal with blueberries, there were no waffles or pancakes to share. Though if you had said, let's have waffles, I would have, just to be closer to you. The distance between us will always be there. Breakfast, lunch, the base of the Eiffel Tower, the canals of St. Petersburg, Russia, running at 7 a.m. on the cobblestones alongside old Amsterdam canals, I stepped to avoid the bicycling city. We should have had the waffles and not argued. We should have gone further south before heading north. Snow hangs on the branches of evergreens and outlines the bottom of my window. When I look into your eyes, I see New Hampshire, Connecticut, a small valley, a wood shingled house set back from the heartache of life. All those pins that prick your heart disappear. And I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Stuart Radowitz. Very nice. Got New Hampshire in there. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Good. As beautiful a poem says, Maxima Khan, and she's right. Well, my next person I'd like to introduce is an illustration that, like the New York Yankees this year on June 12th, with the best record in baseball and home run hitters up and down the lineup from position 1 to 9. It seems like everybody in this book and everybody here in the room reading tonight is a home run hitter, and where to place them, first in the lineup, fifth, ninth in the lineup, it makes no difference because it's an endless cycle. Jane Hirshfield, who was born in New York City, went to was it PS20 or PS40? PS40, yeah, on East 20th Street. Has gone on considerably from there. She's a Guggenheim Fellow, Rockefeller Foundation Fellow, former Chancellor of the American Academy of Poets. And just in 2019 was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. But she still likes to recall, and I remember her telling me the story of how she bought her first book of poems from a display rack on a stationery store on First Avenue. A good friend of poetry in America and worldwide. Please welcome Jane Hirshfield.
Well, thank you so very much. And this has just been an extraordinary reading. Such powerful voices. Bravo, everybody. I loved Neeli's way of reading where you don't see his face, you just see the binder of his poems. I have that same black binder when I'm reading from manuscripts. George and Diane, thank you so much. I'm going to read the poem from the anthology. Is very unusually for me an ekphrastic poem, and I'm going to try to show you the photograph that it was taken. I might have, even though I did grow up in New York, I don't have many poems that center on New York, and I might have declined the warm invitation to be part of this, except I had just written this poem about the photograph. It was taken by B.A. Van Cise, who does honestly live in New York, and he takes one photograph a day for a series he's been doing. And this photograph is Queens, New York, April 18th, 2018, 11:17:53 a.m. And the poem has an epigraph, a very famous line from Paul Eluard. In the moment before touching down, the world scale reads 0. The mistake not made, the perfection not yet accomplished. Runner, buildings, water. The two worlds gaze into each other as if made only by lovers, without form, without text. A single tear ripples the puddles reflecting. This moment cannot be broken, not by the viewer, not by the mortal runner. Ignorant, without gravity, hurrying toward a future suspended forever for one instant more. Let grief and hope pause with her, just above it, as a hand might pause above a pageless notebook bound in goatskin. And I will read you one other poem. This one from a few books back, a book called Come Thief. And this is more how New York, as it rarely does, slips its little cameo from the past into my work. I was in residence at an experimental forest in Oregon's Western Cascades, the H.J. Andrews, and this poem came from having been there. For the lobaria, usnea, witch's hair, map lichen, beard lichen, ground lichen, shield lichen. Back then, what did I know? The names of subway lines, buses, how long it took to walk 20 blocks, uptown and downtown, not north, not south, not you. When I saw you later, Seaweed reefed in the air, you were gray-green, incomprehensible, old. What you clung to, hung from, old. Trees looking half dead, stones. Marriage of fungi and algae, chemists of air, changers of nitrogen unusable into nitrogen usable. Like those nameless ones who kept painting, shaping, engraving, unseen, unread, unremembered, not caring if they were no good, if they were past it. Rock wools, water fans, earth scale, mouse ears, dust, ash of the woods, transformers unvalued, uncounted, cell by cell, word by word, making a world they could live in. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Just fabulous. Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you for contributing a copy of the poem to this book and your collaboration with B.A. Van Cise, a very interesting and talented photographer whose work is one of the illustrations in this book, along with Steve Delachinsky's work and a cover photo by Valerie Oistinu. So thanks again. Our next reader is another illustration of a bi-coastal guy who's from Washington Heights, made famous recently by the movie about the Heights, the Dominican side of it, although his experience in the Heights was different. A San Francisco guy has been recognized and honored in San Francisco for his work, has 2 books with Blue Light Press. The first one shows sort of the range of Blue Light Press and the length of Blue Light Press. Was a Blue Light Press Book Award winner in 2006. So he's a poet of long standing with this community. Please welcome Stewart Florsheim.
Florsheim.
Stewart Florsheim. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Just like the shoes. So thank you, George. It's been a pleasure being in this anthology. I think the work, as we're seeing this afternoon, is excellent. But I think, like you said, I think maybe because of the size of the book, I mean, it really does such a great job, I think, of capturing the multiplicity of New York, which is, I think, again, one of the beauties of the book. I've had the pleasure of living in several cities around the world. And what I get to, even though I haven't been there for many years, I still get to New York and I still feel like, you know, even though I've lived several other places, like I said, New York still feels like home to me. So, so again, great to be in this anthology. I'll be reading a few poems. One is the poem from the anthology. I'll read a couple of other poems about New York, and then I'll finish with another poem by somebody else who's not reading from the anthology. The first poem in the book is called Elevator Down to the A Train. The elevator door is open onto a scene by Bernard. Photos of babies and cats cover the walls. A plastic fern and fuchsia hang from the ceiling. And a fake Persian mat is in the corner where the operator sits on a stool listening to a fugue by Bach. She pulls the handle to shut the door and the people become quiet, almost reverent as they step from photo to photo. The operator and baby at a birthday party, the baby holding a calico kitten. And a few of the writers start to chat. The resemblance between the operator and baby, the two of them sitting under an umbrella that has to be on the west end of Jones Beach. And boy, was it hot there this weekend. An older woman who must be the baby's grandmother. The subway noise begins to drown out Bach. The elevator comes to a slow halt and everyone becomes silent again as they shuffle towards the operator and hover around the door, waiting for her to pull the handle the other way. The next poem I'm going to read, also based in New York, is called Mother's Favorite Drawing. I am with her when she sees the drawing at the gift shop after I drag her through the Met. A 12-year-old teaching his mother about the great things in New York besides Ellis Island. It's the Kata Kollwitz of a woman clutching her child. My mother interrogating the child's eyes for something familiar. The shadow of an old man just before the dreamer awakens. Pattern of a favorite school dress. The arc of a uniformed arm before it smacks her in the head. Color of the suitcase her father lifts off the floor. Mother never buys on impulse, but doesn't hesitate. She even gets it matted and framed in brass. And we carry it home on the number 4 bus. Mother gripping the bar with one hand, the picture secured between her legs. Back in our building, the elevator broken as usual. We carry the picture up 4 floors, past other apartments also filled with survivors, walls bare as ours. And before we take off our coats, Mother wants to hang it over her bed in a spot framed now by the shadow of the fire escape, the steps and ladder imposed over mother and child, bracing them forever in flight. The next poem is called Precipice. 1. In my dream, I wander through the old apartment building. I know all my neighbors are dead, but when I ring their bells and say my name, they open their doors without hesitation. It takes them some time to undo their multiple locks, the police bars, deadbolts, door chains. I wonder if they've been locked up like this for years, most of them refugees from Hitler's Germany, consumed by the fears they secure on their side of the doors. 2. The old ladies pinch my cheeks, even though I'm as old as they were when I lived in the building. They speak to me in German and invite me in, offer me layer cake and Mannerschnitten from Austria. Die Tage sind lang, they say, aber die Zeit geht schnell vorbei. They all know my parents have been ill and ask me how they're doing. I tell them they've been dying for years, but they refuse to let go. 3. The elevator ends on the 6th floor. To get to the roof, I need to climb a flight of steep stairs and push open the heavy metal door. To the south, the George Washington Bridge is lined with traffic. To the west, I can see the Golden Gate. The sun is rising and I hear a multitude of voices, my children, wife, friends. I can't decipher their words, but the sounds are dissonant and sweet. The last poem I'm going to read from the anthology is by a reader who's not here. That's why I chose it. It's a poem I really, really like. I think like almost all the poems, it captures New York really, really well. It's a poem by Cornelius E. called The Ballet Called John the Baptist. A man walking down some street at dusk spies a woman dancing for coins. He stops to watch from a distance. The woman struts like a rooster. She tosses her head back and howls like a cat. He moves closer. The sun catches the faces of the observers. Everyone is dressed in tatters. Everyone stoops, as if born in a small room. The woman steams like a Thanksgiving dinner. One man beats time with a stick on a junk car. Another wipes away tears with a caked and cynical hand. They forget everything as the city goes on about its business, as they circle each other. Beside himself, the man leaps into the center of the ring and begins to dance. He shakes as if he had just been dipped in a cold river. And he laughs, the woman laughs, the men in the circle laugh, until they no longer fit in the world. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Stewart Florsheim, thank you so much. See the George Washington Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge. That's a straight shot from Route 80, 3,000 miles. Yes, you can. Next, to show you that that's possible to do in many different capacities, many different iterations, is a person who's actually born in a bomb shelter in Europe in 1942, but raised in East Oakland, and is really a nationally prominent poet on both coasts, of course. Many people know him because of his association with the Woodstock crowd at the moment, but Andy Clausen used to come and stay at Ginsberg's apartment on East 12th Street in New York City and other poets' houses, and is a good friend to New York City poetry and American beat poetry and beyond. Please welcome Andy Clausen.
The seventh. What courage, what trust, the weary, broken, stepped lump, dropping to sleep in the 4 a.m. 7 train, like a hungry, haggard, unsuccessful Paleolithic dude, too slow for the successful hunt. No choice but to sleep in a field of flesh eaters. What courage, or perhaps how hopelessly beat. Do I try and stop the pickpocket or mind my own business? Why is everyone scratching their wrists and elbows? I mean, scratch and snore and scratch and more scratch. I look across the car and I see an old, white-haired working stiff. I feel his sadness. He looked so beat, so tired. Then I realized it was my reflection in the window. What a dangerous city to sleep in. What a dangerous city to weep in. I don't sleep in the subway, I weep. I weep walking the streets. I don't want to call attention to myself, but my eyes keep leaking. I will not sleep till I throw the bolt to the hardwood door, sleeping with my hatchet, reading You Can't Win by Jack Black. That was the poem that was in the book. And this is not the era of glorious felines. Poet, this is not the time of the glorious epic of cats, nor beaten to death home sweet home homilies. This is not the renaissance of still lifes, exquisite flowers and pretty ewers next to a hunk of brie and gleaming knife. This is not the time of hiding from our children how we got here, fictionalizing manifest destiny as the will of creation. I have nothing against quaint sketches of archaic peasant village life. I've got nothing against recalling the odor of grandma's house, her hair and clothing, the cookies in the oven. I've got no resentment against you sleeping with your cat. Does it go outside? Does it wear a mask? I've got nothing against your pet goldfish teaching you the new dance moves, exploring homonyms where definitions form a metaphor for the opposite. And sure, tell me how you learned to frame a house from a book, how you illuminate every clump or wisp of cloud in the charcoal sky, or spend 3 stanzas on a flower a strange stranger gave you. But how can you, the poets, unacknowledged legislators of the world, you who inspire music and philosophy, avoid our country and world on the gruesome verge of totalitarian insanity not even mentioned in your work? It could be centuries before freedom, authentic democracy shows its face. It could be lights out for the inhuman human race. It could turn the fauna and flora into a pile of rocks. You take all that was noble and magnificent into burbling, eerie, smoky tar pits out of which someday a microbe, an atom, a cell would emerge. Homage Homage to Lenore Candell. Lenore Candell was an effulgent divine. Her under-recognized hymns, odes, love lyrics, and empathy for the sorrow and pain of our search for joy and beauty in the decades and centuries to come will inspire awe and ignite emotions produced by the lexicon of the heart. A poet of generous ability, fulfilling Mary Wollstonecraft's Craft's prophecy of jubilant celebration of female enjoyment of sexuality. The new 20s want to make ridicule, marginalize, besmirch us, search for faults, errors, and sordid history. Let us resist. Let us vindicate, fight for the rights of humor. Let us preserve the breakthrough feeling. Thought is good. Let us use and exhibit our all-loving divinity. Let the orgasm of love save our planet and those of the children who deserve better. May the Futurians have another go. May beat be the future.
That is Andy Clausen. Andy, thank you so much. Great stuff. Great stuff. What a lineup we have today. You all should know that this book is 4 months on the bestseller list and counting, Amazon.com. Going to be around for a long time to come, thanks to your contributions. Really a worthwhile collection. We do have with us, you know him as the poet laureate of San Francisco. People at Rikers Island in Columbia know him as a former student and a teacher there. Guy who cut his teeth in poetry, admittedly, at the Nuyorican Cafe, is now a luminary in San Francisco. 2 books through City Lights. Please welcome Tongo Eisen-Martin.
A day of minutes, seconds like leaves of disloyal city characters and brittle congregations near shelter, dirt, and department store cigarette breaks. Stale Irish brew peels the white away from mid-morning eyes that are already 3 lies awake, and to make matters worse, our hearts are broken. Next morning, our story starts more specific. Hearts don't matter here. Tiling grogginess, a slow flying gutter puddle accompanies a man's cage walk, defines his punchline altitude. This building works hard. This building works the same job for 3 generations. This building works as long as epochs produce money and minstrels. 1/3 of this building does not know it is a third. It woke up groggy. We want to get high. Imagine meaningless water. Imagine orphans making a pact to never have kids. Imagine going to work. This is our first sip. Who knew that concrete would play such a big part in ecological facts, and that mid-morning eyes would leak surprise and hate laughter? Overcrowded is the emotion of conspiracy and toy property rights. There's only 2 kinds of people in this world. One kind owes you money. Category rooftops. Capitalism stands flamboyant in lines that wrap around waterfronts. People pass through, Cadillac swimmers and children who walk on water. Category rooftops, that building means margin, half-block toy shelf, gladiator industry, the nothing business, the nobody. There's a figure in the window. Why does it always look nervous? The 5 train has pillowcases throughout its Franklin Avenue station. Subway station police remind me of pillowcases. Soundless playground, this 3 a.m. train. Childish economics and full self-portrait enthusiasm in vulnerable slumps. We race whistling tracks to some cousin of health. This is your city, your underground. This anonymously high floor became a friend who doesn't know me. A writer's mountain where lineage collapses, expand into your girlfriend's cigarette. Also where strangers lend me temper and proletariat lunch. Arms between bricks and midtown fantasy, a manic border, sort of back then. Enemies will not see each other later in America's heaven. New York, because I said so. That's my cousin, eulogized now in literary history. Wasn't pretty, this effect on my eternal soul. I tried to cry on the side, facing a sink full of alcohol, fine flowers of struggle, that color spectrum, the cousin who's dead if you brace yourself. It's hard to write without my friend, no Malcolm positions on East Coast warfare, my friend, in the audience with the Earth's coming mood, mainland jazz, the organizing is all over me. Let me divine you the Lenox Avenue of the future. The river just keeps riding freights town to town. Violent revolution in this very year. Open your paper tools, rulers of the night train. Your humble dishwashers who live to hum the details, to look into the future like a gentle person. 3/5 of a typewriter. Do some math with me here in the absence of confidence. The luxuries of a paranoia that you can finish later. My friend died yesterday. Like belated parenting, we hold each other in quick bursts now, sample the drug, wrestle the angel, no depth of setting, hiding behind the hordes because I'm in the train business. You don't need a ticket for a winter that only happened here. Behind this room is my mind, ashes runneth over. Thrown around this room is my mind, brim of an innocent soul, which dollar deserves my neck. Thinking about you is like sharing a ghost with half of the city's afterlife. Thinking about you centers us. I'm just a small man in the basement window, chronicling material conditions, boiling water next to a change in the course of poor people's consciousness. I cannot impress you with the names of guns. We haunt each other with absolute pragmatism, with the truth of African transcendence. Another city ends, we hear the fire out. I never really did like the car they found me in. Imagine what defines a creature, where remnants of concrete put none of the world down except slabs of a deadbeat nationalism or a bloodline making the news again. True, I have an absence of style, just a doorstep moving, dead body to dead body. Much love.
Much love, Tongo Eisen-Martin. Watch for his album. He's dropping a double album, I think, or maybe 2 albums very shortly in the next week or so in San Francisco, and I'll be having a party for that. I would like to read one poem by Robert Scotellaro, and then I will turn it over to Diane Frank, our publisher, who's also a contributor to the book, and she'll read her work and give you any final thoughts. But before we do, you'll be dropped into this Neapolitan Italian immigrant inner city neighborhood experience by Robert Scotellaro, where there's people, Caruso's sweating in their T-shirts in the streets and in their underwear and serenading women at the second floor balconies. So it's really a very colorful reminiscence by Robert Scotellaro, a great flash fiction writer and contributor to Blue Light Press. Caruso sweating and Big Nick in his underwear. On the hottest days of summer, when everybody's windows were wide open, he'd come around, an old Italian wino, sweating beneath a heavy wool overcoat 4 sizes too large. He used to roam the backyards between the tenement buildings and sing great songs in Italian with a clear and powerful voice. And people would lean out windows and throw money. Kids would sit with their legs hanging over fire escapes with their mouths open. When he was finished, the old man would bend over like a bird, pick up coins, and fill the pockets of his great overcoat. Sometimes when Big Nick was home, drinking beer in his underwear, he'd yell down to him, "Bravo, bravo, hey, Caruso, here." And he'd throw out a fistful of singles. And the old man would, with sweat running down his face, would stand under the window and pour out his soul and sing Nick's favorite song, Male Femmine. And many of the women would cry, and the sun would shine down through the hot, muggy summer, and it would rain money in the backyards. Robert Scotellaro. Great poem. Thank you, all of you who've read. Now I will turn it over to Diane Frank, who is the Uber host for this event and a contributor to the book for her poems and final comments. Thank you.
Well, George gets set because after I read, I'm going to ask you to read too. At least, at least one. Okay. So I'm going to start with my poem in the book. The last time I was in Manhattan, which was just a few months before the pandemic, I had the good fortune to read with Francine Witte. That's where I met her for the first time. And I also had the good fortune to meet Venantius Pinto, the artist who painted the cover of my recent book, Cannon for Bears in Ponderosa Pines. I love his work. And while he was painting, he included me in his artistic process. I sent him 5 or 6 poems with the key images from the book. I also sent him a photograph of me playing the cello, but told him to take liberties with that. And my poem Venantius is inspired by his painting. Venantius. He was the crazy man singing the blues between cars on the A train, levitating to the moon on a painted trail of light. At the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, he released the baby alligators from their cages during the high wire act, with lions jumping through feathered hoops below. Around him, women riding horses wore pink feathered plumes. Hawkers sold cotton candy and Cracker Jacks. He asked for a photograph of me playing the cello, my arm drawing the bow into a long, low note. I was wearing silk, concert black, my fingers breathing the music I played that night. Around my cello, he drew images of bears, rivers, waterfalls, Himalayan peaks, where elephants, butterflies, fractals dream in swirling colors on a mountain trail. He painted sacred syllables in Sanskrit, Hebrew, Tibetan, and in ancient kanji calligraphy, what he heard inside the music. After weeks of painting, he tiptoed over the border where his amigos from Mexico put his painting in a mailing tube and sent it to San Francisco. Inside his meditation, a sanctuary where the colors swirl and blend. Outside his window, a river of humanity. New York City is always a circus. And since a number of us here met at Syracuse University, I'm going to read a poem from those days. My junior year, we had a 20-hour marathon concert on J.S. Bach's birthday. It was his 285th birthday. So this is Magnificat for J.S. Bach. It was the old man's 285th birthday, and I mean the maestro, the Illuminata, Johann Sebastian Bach. I was a university student, and to celebrate 3 centuries of musical genius, our conductor led a 20-hour marathon concert starting early in the morning. All day, musicians and students migrated in and out of the auditorium with motets, cantatas, and concertos. A barefooted organist played the toccata and fugue in D minor, then a prelude entirely with his feet. I was amazed at the synergy of dance and sound. Our concertmaster dazzled us by playing the 6 Bach cello suite arranged for violin with his eyes closed. No music stand as he tuned to an inner singing. Segue to the entire orchestra walking on stage to play the 2nd Brandenburg Concerto, the concerto for 2 harpsichords, the concerto for 3 harpsichords, and later, just after sunset, the Magnificat. I was playing cello next to the harpsichord, inside the sway of its musical body, surrounded by tones that took me back to an earlier century. That night, I had my first experience of musical transcendence. The moon was glowing through stained glass. On the stage, we were playing the Magnificat. Inside, we were flying in otherworldly ecstasy. By 10 o'clock that night, I could swear the maestro was there, listening and sometimes playing with us. Years later, on the other side of the continent, one of my private pleasures is playing the Bach cello suites late at night with no one listening. And sometimes by the ocean, with the moon glowing toward full, the old man whispers to me, "Thank you very much. And now I'm going to introduce George Wallace. You're the editor of this book. You should read too." And I knew when we had the idea to publish this book, to gather the poems, that George was the right person to do it.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you very much. You know, in a way, I should have started off with this poem, but we'll conclude this celebration today from San Francisco and from New York by reading, in honor and recognition of the first peoples of both of these places, because the Ohlone and the Pomo natives of the Bay Area, Northern California, and the Lenape Indians, Native Americans of Manhattan Island and other places. This poem by Joseph Brushac. Joseph Brushac is an Abenaki from maybe 50 miles north of New York City, but has spent time in New York City. He'll be reading, Lorraine, I know you're still here, he'll be reading with us at the Brooklyn Book Fair by Zoom. And this is a Native American take on Manhattan Island. So I'll conclude with this poem by Joseph Brushac, B-R-U-C-H-A-C. City of Dreams. Stone on stone, we see you, Manhattan, not just as you are now, but as you were, as you always will be, in our lodges of memory, held between rivers and the deep breath of ocean. You remain the place of many meetings, words sung in many tongues, the mother of dreams. You were never sold. You cannot be bought. Joseph Brushac. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Those of you who read, those of you who listened, all of you out there, please stick with us. We're going to be doing a lot of things live and Zooming. If you're in the New York City area, come join us. Otherwise, maybe you can catch us on Zoom and get a copy of the book. And thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to turn it back over and thank Don Krieger, who is now internationally known as an engineer of poetry events, and thank him for his work in pulling this together. He's going to be creating a YouTube out of this, and he's streamed it October to Facebook. Thank you so much. Diane Frank, Don Krieger, on behalf of all of you, I'll say good night to our audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much.